The signal crackled through space like a dying star. Commander Harvick leaned back in his command seat, watching the translated broadcasts from the primitive planet below. Flickering images showed creatures fighting each other with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. These humans, as they called themselves, were barely civilized. "How many systems have we conquered now?" Harvick asked his second officer. 412, Commander, Lieutenant Bryn replied, his voice filled with youthful pride. "This will be 413. Harvick allowed himself a small smile. The Draylan sovereignty had never lost a military engagement in 10,000 years. This backwater planet would take perhaps 3 days to subdue. Maybe 4 if the locals were particularly stubborn. The resource scans showed rich deposits of rare minerals beneath the surface. The temperate climate would make excellent colony sites. And the natives themselves could be trained as labor once they understood their place in the Empire. "Their technology is fascinating," Science Officer Tam said, reviewing the data streams. "They use controlled explosions to propel themselves into space. Very inefficient, but creative for such a young species." "Creative like children playing with dangerous toys," Harvick muttered. He had seen dozens of primitive worlds during his 3 centuries of service. They all followed the same pattern. First came the denial, then the desperate resistance. Finally, the inevitable surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. This planet would be no different. Admiral Quen's face appeared on the communication screen from the capital world, light years away. Her scales gleamed silver in the artificial light of the high command chamber. "Commander Harvick, you have authorization to proceed with standard subjugation protocols. 200 warships should be more than sufficient for a pre-FTL civilization. Make it quick and clean. The mining corporations are already preparing equipment for deployment." "Understood, Admiral. We will have their surrender within 72 standard cycles." The fleet assembled in formation, each vessel bristling with weapons capable of cracking a planet's crust. Harvick had personally overseen the conquest of 17 worlds. He knew exactly how this would unfold. The show of force, the demands, the futile resistance, the submission. It was almost boring in its predictability. "Set course for the 3rd planet," he ordered. "Prepare translation matrices for all major languages. I want their leaders to understand our terms perfectly." The journey through their crude solar system took 6 hours. Harvick studied the intelligence reports during the transit. The planet had over 200 separate nations, constantly bickering and fighting among themselves. Perfect, divided enemies were the easiest to conquer. They would spend more time arguing with each other than organizing any meaningful defense. "We are detecting primitive satellites in orbit," Bryn reported. "Weapons platforms with nuclear warheads. Should we destroy them?" "No need. Their yield is too low to penetrate our shields. Let them waste their ammunition if they wish. It will demonstrate their helplessness more effectively than any speech I could give." The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the planet's gravitational well. Harvick activated the broadcasting system, sending his message across every frequency the humans used. "Inhabitants of the 3rd planet. I am Commander Harvick of the Draylan Sovereignty. Your world has been selected for annexation into our empire. You will surrender all military assets immediately. Your governments will dissolve and accept Draylan authority. Resistance will result in the destruction of your major population centers. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply." The translation software worked flawlessly, converting his words into hundreds of human languages simultaneously. Now came the waiting period. Usually, the primitive species spent hours in panicked discussions, before sending back a mixture of pleas and empty threats, but the human response came within minutes. A single voice, calm and measured, spoke in what the computer identified as their dominant trade language. "Commander Harvick of the Draylan Sovereignty. This is General Brooks of the United Earth Defense Coalition. We have monitored your empire's expansion for 80 of our years. We calculated you would eventually reach our system. You have made a grave miscalculation. This is your only warning. Leave immediately or face complete annihilation of your fleet." Harvick laughed. He could not help himself. A pre-FTL species threatening the Draylan sovereignty? It was absurd. Tam looked uncomfortable, but Bryn was grinning. United Earth Defense Coalition? Harvick repeated mockingly. Lieutenant, did our intelligence detect any such organization? No, Commander. Their military forces appear fragmented across numerous nation-states. We detected no unified command structure. Then they formed it in the last few hours, Harvick said, still amused. How touching. They think unity will save them. He opened the channel again. General Brooks, your bravery is noted. However, you are delaying the inevitable. We have conquered 412 worlds. Some of them had technology far beyond yours. They all knelt before the Draylan sovereignty. You will too. Then those 412 worlds did not have 80 years to prepare for your arrival, Brooks replied. Commander, I strongly suggest you reconsider. You were warned. Harvick cut the transmission. Move to bombardment range. Prepare to demonstrate our weapons on an uninhabited landmass. Once they see what we can do, their courage will evaporate like water in vacuum. The fleet advanced in perfect formation. 200 ships moving as one, their weapons charging, their shields at maximum strength. Below them, the blue and green planet rotated peacefully, ignorant of its impending subjugation. Target acquired, the weapons officer announced. Uninhabited island chain in their southern ocean. Firing solution locked. Fire, Harvick commanded. The plasma beam lanced downward, bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. It would vaporize the entire island chain, boil the surrounding ocean, and send a message that could not be misunderstood, but the beam never reached the surface. An invisible barrier caught it midway through the atmosphere, deflecting the plasma harmlessly into space. Alarm shrieked across the command deck. Harvick jumped from his seat. What just happened? Unknown energy shield, Commander. It is covering the entire planet. Our weapons cannot penetrate it. Harvick felt the first stirring of doubt in his chest. No pre-FTL civilization should have planetary defense shields. That was impossible. Scan for the shield generators. Prepare a second volley to target them directly. Commander, Tam said quietly, I am detecting multiple weapons platforms. They were not there a moment ago. What do you mean they were not there? They just appeared on sensors. Hundreds of them. In orbit, on their moon, throughout their inner solar system. They were hidden somehow. Harvick stared at the tactical display as red indicators bloomed across the screen like poisonous flowers. And then, emerging from stealth like predators from tall grass, came the human ships. They were smaller than Draylan vessels, sleeker, and moving impossibly fast. Lieutenant Bryn's fingers trembled over the scanning controls. The data streaming across his screen made no sense. His training had prepared him for many scenarios, but not this. Never this. Commander, the biological readings from the planet are unusual. Harvick tore his attention away from the human ships circling his fleet like sharks. Unusual how? The gravity, sir. It is 0.98 standard. Nearly double what Draylan physiology considers optimal. The atmospheric oxygen content is 21%. That concentration would cause cellular damage to our ground troops within hours of exposure. Science Officer Tam pulled up additional data, his crest feathers flattening against his skull in instinctive alarm. Commander, this planet is classified as a Class 12 deathworld. I am cross-referencing with the Imperial database now. We have only encountered 3 such worlds in our entire history. Harvick felt cold spread through his body. Deathworlds were the stuff of military academy horror stories. Planets where everything evolved to kill, where the native species had to become apex predators just to survive to reproductive age. The 3 previous deathworlds the Empire had discovered were either uninhabited or home to primitive species that had destroyed themselves through warfare before achieving space travel. Show me the predator. Analysis, Harvick demanded, the holographic display filled with creatures that made his blood run cold. Massive reptiles with teeth longer than a Draylan forearm. pack hunters with coordination that suggested hive mind intelligence, ocean dwellers large enough to swallow a landing craft whole, and the humans had evolved alongside all of them, competed with them, survived them. Their muscle density is 3 times ours, Tam continued, his voice barely above a whisper. They have redundant organ systems. Their skeletal structure can withstand impacts that would pulverize our bones. Their healing factor allows them to recover from wounds that would be fatal to most spacefaring species. This changes nothing, Harvick said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We have superior technology, superior firepower. We do not need to match them physically. Commander, look at their weapons platforms, Bryn said, highlighting several of the human vessels on the tactical display. I am detecting railgun systems firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Directed energy weapons with focusing capabilities beyond our theoretical maximums. And their ships. They are not using chemical propulsion anymore. That was all misdirection. Harvick studied the sensor data more carefully. The human ships moved with impossible agility. Their acceleration rates should have turned any organic crew into paste against the bulkheads. But humans came from a high-gravity world. What would kill a Draylen crew they likely considered merely uncomfortable? How long have they been spacefaring? Harvick asked quietly. Tam checked the intercepted broadcasts. Based on their transmissions, they achieved their first orbital flight 67 local years ago. But Commander, I am detecting construction signatures on their moon that date back at least 80 years. And there are facilities throughout their inner solar system that our initial scans completely missed. They hid from us, Harvick said, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. They detected our empire's expansion. They watched us conquer system after system. And they prepared. A new voice crackled over the communication channel. The same General Brooks from before, but now his tone carried an edge of steel. Commander Harvick, you have 60 seconds to begin retreat procedures. After that, we will consider you a hostile threat to Earth and respond accordingly. Harvick activated his response channel. General Brooks, we outnumber you 10-1. Your ships are smaller and fewer. You cannot possibly believe you can defeat a Draylen battle fleet. Commander, you are evaluating this engagement using Draylen tactical models. Those models assume your opponent values self-preservation above mission completion. They assume rational cost-benefit analysis. They assume your enemy will retreat when losses become unacceptable. We are humans from Earth. We evolved as persistence predators. Do you know what that means? Harvick did not respond. Tam pulled up the biological file on persistence predation. It was a hunting strategy used by only the most terrifying predators. Chase the prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Accept any injury. Endure any hardship. Never stop. Never quit. Never let the prey escape, Brooks continued. It means we kept running after prey for days until it died of exhaustion. It means we evolved to ignore pain, suppress fear, and continue fighting long after any sensible creature would have fled. It means we are very, very good at breaking things that threaten us. You have 30 seconds, Commander. All ships, combat formation, Harvick ordered. He could not show weakness. Could not retreat on first contact. The Empire was watching. His career depended on this. Prepare to engage the human fleet. Target their weapons platforms first. 15 seconds, Commander, Brooks said calmly. The Draylen fleet moved into attack position. 200 warships against perhaps 50 human vessels. The numbers were on Harvick's side. They had to be 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. The human ships opened fire. Harvick had witnessed many space battles in his long career. They usually unfolded in predictable patterns. Energy weapons splashing against shields. Missiles tracking targets. A gradual exchange of fire until one side's shields failed and they requested terms. This was not that kind of battle. The human railguns fired metal slugs at velocities that made them relativistic projectiles. The Draylen shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons, simply did not register solid matter moving at those speeds. The projectiles punched through shield generators like they were not there at all. The first three Draylen cruisers exploded in silence, their fusion cores breaching as railgun slugs tore through their engineering sections. Evasive maneuvers, Harvick screamed, but the human ships moved faster. They anticipated every escape vector. Their coordination was perfect, as if they were all connected to a single tactical intelligence, which Harvick realized with growing horror they probably were. The humans had artificial intelligence. True AI, not the limited expert systems the Draylen used. The human energy weapons fired in coordinated volleys, overwhelming individual shield generators through synchronized strikes. And when Draylen ships tried to return fire, the humans simply were not where the targeting computers expected them to be. "We have lost 17 ships," Bryn reported, his voice shaking. "Battle duration, 90 seconds. 90 seconds. In 90 seconds, the humans had destroyed nearly 10% of the fleet. At this rate, the entire Draylen force would be eliminated in under 15 minutes. Harvick watched another squadron of Draylen destroyers break apart under human fire. These were vessels that had participated in dozens of planetary conquests, ships that had never been seriously damaged, and the humans were tearing through them like they were made of paper. "Commander, we must retreat," Tam said urgently. Pride warred with survival instinct in Harvick's chest. Every fiber of his training said to press the attack, to trust in Draylen's superiority, to believe that numbers and firepower would eventually triumph. But he was watching his fleet die, and the human ships had not even been scratched. "All vessels, fall back to FTL transition range. Prepare to jump on my command." The remaining Draylen ships broke formation, racing toward the edge of the gravity well where they could activate their faster-than-light drives. The human ships pursued, cutting down stragglers with surgical precision. "Charging FTL drives," Bryn announced. 10 seconds to transition. But then every alarm on the command deck started screaming at once. "Commander, we cannot engage FTL. Something is disrupting the transition field." Harvick stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had deployed some kind of interdiction technology. His fleet was trapped in the system, trapped with an enemy that was systematically destroying them. And then General Brooks's voice returned, calm and utterly without mercy. "We warned you, Commander. Retreat was an option before you fired on Earth. Now we ensure you never threaten our world again." Explosions painted the darkness with brief flowers of light. Harvick gripped the armrests of his command seat so hard his claws left marks in the metal. Around his flagship, the Draylen fleet was dying ship by ship, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Redirect all auxiliary power to shields," he ordered. "Return fire on any target within range." The weapons officer worked frantically at his console. "Commander, the humans are too fast. Our targeting computers cannot lock onto them. By the time we calculate a firing solution, they have already moved." Through the viewport, Harvick watched a human vessel dance between 3 Draylen cruisers. It was smaller than any of them, but it moved like a living thing. The Draylen ships fired volley after volley of plasma bolts. Every single shot missed. The human ship responded with a single railgun burst that severed the engine section from one cruiser, sending it spinning helplessly into space. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Bryn reported. "Sealing emergency bulkheads." "We have casualties. How many ships have we lost?" Harvick asked, though he feared the answer. 83, Commander. Less than 4 hours since first contact. 4 hours. The Empire's military analysts had estimated this conquest would take 3 days. Instead, the Draylen sovereignty was being humiliated by a species that was supposed to be primitive. "Commander, incoming transmission from the human fleet," the communications officer said. "Put it through." General Brooks appeared on the screen. He was older than Harvick had expected, with gray hair and lines around his eyes. But those eyes were sharp and calculating. The eyes of a predator. "Commander Harvick, you have fought bravely. Your crew has shown discipline under fire. I respect that. But this battle is over. Order your remaining ships to power down weapons and shields. We will disable your vessels and take your crews into custody. You will not be harmed. You expect me to surrender? Harvick said, forcing strength into his voice. The Draylan sovereignty does not surrender. Then the Draylan sovereignty will learn a new concept today, Brooks replied. Commander, I have studied your species. I know about your honor codes. I know surrender feels like death to you. But I am offering you something rare in warfare. I am offering your crews their lives. Do not throw them away for pride. Before Harvick could respond, a massive impact rocked the flagship. Sparks flew from overhead panels. The lights flickered and stabilized on emergency power. Direct hit to our primary shield generator, Cam reported. Shields at 30% and falling. Return fire, Harvick ordered. We cannot get a targeting lock, Commander. Another impact. Then another. The human ships were not trying to destroy the flagship, Harvick realized. They were methodically taking apart its weapons and defensive systems. They wanted to capture him alive. All remaining ships form defensive formation around the flagship, Harvick commanded. Buy us time to repair the shield generator. But there were so few ships left now. Perhaps 80 vessels out of the 200 he had started with. And the human fleet was everywhere at once, cutting off escape routes, disabling engines, destroying weapons arrays. Commander, multiple human ships approaching. They are deploying boarding craft. Harvick stood from his seat. Seal all airlocks. Arm the crew? If they want this ship, they will have to fight for every corridor. The boarding craft attached to the hull with magnetic clamps. Cutting tools began slicing through the outer armor. Harvick grabbed a plasma rifle from the weapons locker and moved toward the bridge entrance. Bryn and Tam followed, along with a dozen security personnel. They will expect us to defend the bridge, Tam said. That is standard doctrine. Then that is where we will make our stand, Harvick replied. The sounds of cutting stopped. A moment of silence. Then the shriek of metal being torn apart. Emergency alarms wailed as atmosphere began venting from the breached sections. The bulkheads sealed automatically. But Harvick knew the humans would be through them in minutes. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the bridge. Heavy footsteps, but moving with surprising speed. Harvick aimed his rifle at the door and waited. The bridge entrance exploded inward in a shower of sparks and debris. Harvick fired blindly into the smoke. His shots hit nothing but air. The humans entered. They wore powered armor that made them even larger than their already impressive frames. The armor was dark, absorbing light, covered in sensors and weapon systems. But what struck Harvick most was how they moved. Despite the armor, despite their size, they moved with fluid precision, like the apex predators they had evolved from. Drop your weapons, a synthesized voice commanded from the lead armored figure. Harvick fired his rifle. The plasma bolt hit the human square in the chest. The armor's energy field absorbed the shot without visible damage. The human did not even flinch. Last warning. Drop your weapons or we will disable you by force. We do not wish to harm you, but we will if necessary. The security personnel looked to Harvick. He could see fear in their eyes. Not fear of death, which every Draylan soldier accepted as part of service, but fear of how easily these humans had swept through the fleet. Fear of facing an enemy that should not exist. Harvick lowered his rifle. The others followed his example. We surrender. The humans moved forward with surprising gentleness. They took the weapons carefully, almost respectfully. Medical personnel in lighter armor entered and began treating wounded Draylan crew members. One approached Harvick and began scanning him with a handheld device. You are injured, the medic said. The translator rendered the human's voice as concerned, almost caring. Fractured ribs from the impact. I can treat that. I am your prisoner, Harvick said bitterly. Why does my health matter to you? The medic paused, considering the question. Because you are a living being in pain, and I took an oath to prevent suffering where I can. The war is over, Commander. You lost. But that does not mean you have to suffer unnecessarily. The medic applied some kind of medical foam to Harvick's chest. Almost immediately the pain receded. Harvick stared at the human in confusion. In Draylen military doctrine, prisoners were liabilities. They were treated adequately to prevent death, but comfort was not considered necessary. Yet here was a human warrior, fresh from battle, showing compassion to his enemy. "I do not understand you," Harvick said quietly. "You will," the medic replied. "You have time to learn now." The lead armored figure removed their helmet. A human female looked at Harvick with those sharp predator eyes. But there was no cruelty in them. Only determination. "Commander Harvick, I am Colonel Wright of the Earth Defense Force. You and your crew will be transported to our medical frigate. Your injured will receive treatment. Your healthy personnel will be housed in comfortable quarters. You will be fed, given access to entertainment and communication with each other. In 3 days, you will meet with General Brooks. He will explain what happens next. What happens next?" Harvick echoed. "You have destroyed my fleet. Taken me prisoner. What more is there?" Colonel Wright's expression grew serious. "Commander, destroying your fleet was the easy part. What comes next determines whether your empire survives or joins you in defeat. General Brooks will explain. For now, come with me. Your crew needs to see you are unharmed. They need to know that human mercy is real, not propaganda." Harvick allowed himself to be led away from the bridge of his former flagship. Through the corridors he saw human soldiers helping wounded Draylen crew members, saw medical personnel treating burns and broken bones, saw his people being treated with a respect that prisoners of war rarely received, and Harvick began to realize that humanity was far more dangerous than he had initially believed. Not because of their weapons or their technology, but because they fought with conviction rather than conquest. Because they showed mercy to defeated enemies. Because they made it impossible to hate them even as they destroyed you, the Draylen. Sovereignty had conquered 400 worlds through superior firepower and ruthless efficiency. But Earth had just demonstrated something far more powerful. The ability to win not just battles but hearts. The medical frigate smelled strange to Harvick. Not unpleasant, just different. The humans maintained a higher oxygen concentration than Draylen ships, and the temperature was warmer. But his quarters were comfortable. More than comfortable, actually. They were better than his own cabin had been on the flagship. 3 days had passed since the surrender. 3 days of watching human efficiency in action. The wounded Draylen crew members received medical care that surpassed anything in the Empire's military hospitals. The healthy personnel were housed in clean rooms with soft sleeping surfaces and access to entertainment systems. They were fed regularly with food synthesized to match Draylen nutritional requirements, and they were confused. Every single one of them. Lieutenant Bryn sat across from Harvick in the common area where prisoners were allowed to gather. The young officer looked lost, his certainty shattered by reality. "Commander, I do not understand. We attacked them. We came to conquer their world. We fired on their planet. And they treat us like honored guests? Why?" Harvick had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. "I do not know, Lieutenant. It goes against everything we were taught about warfare." Science Officer Tam approached, carrying a datapad. "Commander, I have been reviewing the information the humans provided us. About their history, their wars, their philosophy. I think I'm beginning to understand." "Explain," Harvick said. Tam activated the datapad, showing images of Earth's history. The humans fought each other for thousands of years. Nation against nation. Ideology against ideology. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Nuclear weapons that could have rendered Earth uninhabitable. And they came very close to using them several times. "So they are warriors," Bryn said. "We knew that." "Yes, but listen to what happened next. They realized that total war would destroy everyone. So they developed rules, treaties, laws governing warfare. The Geneva Conventions, they call them. Rules that say even enemies have rights. That prisoners must be treated humanely. That medical personnel are neutral. That there are some weapons too terrible to use." Harvick frowned. "Those rules would handicap military effectiveness. That is what the Draylen military academies teach," Tam agreed. But the humans learned something we did not. They learned that how you treat defeated enemies determines what comes after the war. If you show mercy, your enemy might become your ally. If you show cruelty, you create resistance that never ends. The door to the common area opened. General Brooks entered, accompanied by 2 guards who stood by the entrance but did not approach. Brooks looked around the room, making eye contact with several of the Draylen prisoners before focusing on Harvick. Commander Harvick, thank you for meeting with me. Would you prefer to speak privately, or are you comfortable discussing matters here? Harvick stood. My crew has earned the right to hear whatever you have to say. Brooks nodded approvingly. Very well. Commander, I want to show you something. May I use your datapad, Science Officer Tam? Tam handed over the device. Brooks connected it to a portable projector and activated a holographic display. The image showed a star map. The Draylen Empire's territory glowed in red. 412 systems, just as Harvick had proudly stated when this began. Your empire is vast, Brooks said. 10,000 years of expansion. Countless species brought under Draylen control. An impressive achievement by any measure. And now you will demand we surrender all of it, Harvick said bitterly. No, Brooks replied calmly. We will demand you surrender none of it. Silence filled the room. Every Draylen prisoner stared at Brooks in confusion. I do not understand, Harvick said slowly. Brooks zoomed in on the star map. Commander, while your fleet was traveling to Earth, human intelligence operatives were very busy. We have mapped every Draylen military installation. We know the location of every fleet, every shipyard, every weapons platform. We have agents embedded in your communication networks. We have weapons platforms positioned around key Draylen worlds. If we wished, we could cripple your empire in a coordinated first strike. The Draylen prisoners shifted uncomfortably. Harvick felt his blood run cold. But we will not do that, Brooks continued, because Earth does not want an empire. We do not want to rule you. We want something much simpler. We want you to stop conquering other species. Brooks changed the holographic display. Now it showed a dozen worlds that Harvick recognized as recent Draylen conquests. These species did not ask to be part of your empire. They were peaceful. They were building their own civilizations. And you came with warships and took everything from them. That is the natural order, Harvick said, though his voice lacked conviction. The strong rule. The weak serve. No, Commander. That is not natural order. That is imperial doctrine. There is a difference. Brooks pulled up another image. This one showed Earth itself. We know what it is like to be the weak ones. For most of human history, we were fragmented. Fighting each other, vulnerable to any external threat. We calculated that if a spacefaring empire found us before we were ready, we would be conquered. So we prepared. We unified. We built defenses. We did everything necessary to ensure that when someone like you arrived, we would survive. Brooks turned to face Harvick directly. But here is what makes humans different from the Draylen, Commander. We did not just prepare to defend ourselves. We prepared to defend others. For the last 40 years, human special operations forces have been making contact with species under your control. We have been arming them, training them, teaching them how to resist. And now, coordinated with your fleet's defeat, they are rising up. The star map changed again. On worlds throughout the Draylen Empire, red indicators were turning yellow. Rebellion markers, you are attacking our entire empire? Harvick asked, stunned. We are liberating species who want their freedom, Brooks corrected. The Draylen military is spread thin across 400 systems. You do not have enough ships to suppress simultaneous uprisings on 40 worlds, especially not after losing 200 of your best vessels here at Earth. Bryn spoke up, his voice shaking. You planned all of this. For decades? 80 years, Brooks confirmed. We detected your empire's expansion pattern. We calculated you would reach Earth eventually. So we prepared. We built our fleet. We infiltrated your territory. We made contact with your victims. And we waited. Everything that has happened was predicted and planned for. Harvick sank back into his seat. What do you want from us? Brooks deactivated the hologram. In 72 hours, Admiral Quen of the Draylen High Command will arrive at a neutral space station. Representatives from the species you conquered will also be present. We will negotiate a treaty. The Draylen will keep your core 50 systems. You will grant independence to all conquered territories. You will dismantle your conquest fleets and maintain only defensive forces. In exchange, Earth will provide economic support during the transition. We will help you build a sustainable society that does not require expansion and conquest. And if we refuse? Harvick asked. Then we will do it by force, Brooks said simply. And thousands of Draylen will die in the process. Commander, I have seen your personnel files. You are a military officer, not a politician. You follow orders. So, I'm not asking you to make decisions about your empire's future. But I am asking you to carry a message to your superiors. What message? Brooks met Harvick's eyes with that predator stare. Tell them that Earth is not interested in revenge. We are not interested in domination. We are interested in justice. Tell them that every species in this galaxy deserves the right to choose their own destiny. And tell them that humans will fight to protect that right. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone. Harvick thought about his 3 centuries of military service. All the worlds he had helped conquer. All the species he had seen broken and absorbed into the Empire. He had thought it was glorious. Had thought it was his duty. Had never questioned whether it was right. I will deliver your message, Harvick said quietly. But I cannot promise they will listen. They will listen, Brooks said with certainty. Because the alternative is the end of their empire. And because, deep down, even the Draylen High Command knows that an empire built on conquest cannot last forever. Eventually you conquer the wrong species. You push too far. You make a mistake you cannot recover from. Brooks stood to leave. You came to Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, you found a species that had been preparing for you for longer than some of your crew have been alive. Learn from this, Commander. Adapt, survive, and maybe, in time, the Draylen can become partners instead of conquerors. As Brooks left the room, Harvick sat in silence. Around him, his crew members whispered among themselves. Some were angry. Some were scared. But Harvick saw something else in their eyes as well. Relief that they had survived. Relief that the humans had shown mercy. And perhaps, just perhaps, relief that the endless cycle of conquest might finally be ending. The High Command Chamber had witnessed 10,000 years of Draylen victories. Today, it witnessed something unprecedented. Silence born not from reverence, but from fear, Admiral Quen stood at the central podium, watching the holographic recording of Commander Harvick's interrogation for the 3rd time. Around her, the 12 members of the High Command sat in their elevated seats. Some looked angry. Some looked thoughtful. War Marshal Tev looked ready to start throwing things. This is unacceptable. Tev roared, slamming his fist on the armrest. A pre-FTL civilization destroys our fleet and we are supposed to negotiate? We should mobilize the entire Imperial Navy and reduce their planet to ash. With what ships? Admiral Quen asked calmly. We lost 200 vessels at Earth. The humans claim to have positioned weapons around our key worlds. And 40 of our conquered territories are in open rebellion. Where exactly do you propose we find the forces for an assault on Earth? We have thousands of ships across the Empire. Spread across 400 systems, High Counselor Pell interjected. War Marshal, our military strength has always relied on superior technology and the element of surprise. The humans have demonstrated technology equal or superior to ours, and they have eliminated any element of surprise by infiltrating our communication networks. If we attack Earth, they will know we are coming long before we arrive. Another counselor, Defense Minister Rao, brought up a tactical display. I have reviewed the battle data from Harvick's fleet. The human victory was not luck. It was systematic superiority in every category that matters. Faster ships, better weapons, superior coordination, And most concerning, they demonstrated tactical innovation we have never encountered. Our military doctrine assumes enemies will behave predictably. The humans did not. War Marshal Tev crossed his arms. So we surrender? 10,000 years of empire building ends because one fleet failed? One fleet did not fail, Admiral Quen corrected. One fleet was completely annihilated by a species we underestimated. There is a difference. Failure implies the outcome could have been different with better execution. Commander Harvick executed properly. He followed doctrine. The humans were simply better. Tev looked like he wanted to argue, but High Counselor Pell raised a hand for silence. We need to discuss the implications of what the humans told Commander Harvick. They claim to have been preparing for us for 80 years. They claim to have infiltrated our territory. They claim to have armed and trained resistance forces on 40 worlds. Are these claims credible? Intelligence Director Shen stepped forward, his expression grim. I have spent the last 3 days verifying the human claims. They are not exaggerating. We have detected coordinated uprisings on 38 worlds so far. The resistance forces are using weapons and tactics consistent with human military doctrine. Our garrison commanders are reporting that the rebels seem to know our defensive positions, our response protocols, our supply routes. Someone trained them very well. How did we not detect this? Tev demanded. Because we were not looking for it, Shen admitted. Our intelligence apparatus focuses on external threats, spacefaring civilizations that might challenge us. We never considered that a pre-FTL species might be conducting covert operations within our territory. The humans exploited that blind spot perfectly. Admiral Quen pulled up a different display, showing the distribution of Draylen military forces. Even if we wanted to suppress all 38 rebellions simultaneously, we lack sufficient forces. Each uprising would require a minimum of 20 ships to contain. That is 760 vessels. We have perhaps 900 available for deployment. And that assumes we strip defenses from critical systems. What about the weapons platforms the humans claim to have positioned around our worlds? Another counselor asked. We have detected them, Shen confirmed. Stealth satellites in orbit around 18 of our most important systems, including our capital. The humans could destroy our infrastructure without ever entering weapons range of our defensive fleets. Silence again. The kind of silence that comes when people realize their entire worldview has been shattered. High Counselor Pell spoke carefully. I'm going to say something that may be considered treasonous, but someone needs to say it. Perhaps the humans are right. Perhaps our empire has grown too large. Perhaps conquest is not sustainable as a long-term strategy. War Marshal Tev stood abruptly. That is treasonous. The Draylen sovereignty is built on the principle of expansion and assimilation. To abandon that principle is to abandon what makes us Draylen. Is it? Pell challenged. War Marshal, I have studied our empire's history. Do you know what percentage of our territory is actually colonized by ethnic Draylen? Less than 15%. The rest is conquered species, ruled through military occupation and threat of force. We call it an empire, but it is really just a protection racket enforced by superior firepower. And now we have meta-species with even more superior firepower. What does that make us? Tev had no answer. Admiral Quen took control of the meeting again. We have 72 hours to decide. We can accept the human terms and negotiate a peace treaty, or we can reject their ultimatum and face the consequences. I recommend we review exactly what they are demanding. She pulled up the terms General Brooks had outlined. They want us to keep our core 50 systems. That includes our homeworld and our most established colonies. They want us to grant independence to conquered territories. They want us to maintain only defensive military forces. In exchange, they offer economic support during the transition and a guarantee of non-aggression. Why would they offer support? Someone asked. If they wanted to destroy us, this would be the perfect opportunity. That is what makes them so dangerous, Admiral Quen said softly. They do not want to destroy us. They want to change us. and that is far more threatening to our way of life than any military defeat. If we accept their terms, the Draylen sovereignty as we know it will end. We will become just another species in the galaxy. Equal, not superior. And if we refuse? Tev asked, though his voice had lost its earlier fire. Then we fight a war we cannot win against an enemy that has been preparing for decades. We lose everything instead of keeping 50 systems. And thousands of Draylen die in the process. Pell looked around the chamber. I motion that we send Admiral Quen to negotiate with the humans, to determine if their terms are acceptable and if they will negotiate in good faith. 8 counselors raised their hands in agreement. 3 abstained. Only War Marshal Tev voted against. Motion carries, Pell announced. Admiral Quen, you have authority to represent the High Command in negotiations with Earth. Seek the best terms you can. But understand this. We cannot win a military confrontation. Our only leverage is in negotiation. Quen nodded. I understand. I will leave immediately. As the meeting adjourned, War Marshal Tev approached Quen privately. His earlier anger had transformed into something colder. You may be willing to surrender 10,000 years of history, Tev said quietly. But some of us still remember what it means to be Draylen. Some of us still have pride. Pride is what brought us to this point, Quen replied. Pride made us think we were invincible. Pride made us blind to the threat Earth posed. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. Tev said nothing more, but Quen saw the calculation in his eyes. She had seen that look before in military officers who felt betrayed by their leadership. It was the look of someone planning something desperate, but there was no time to address it now. She had 72 hours to save what remained of the Draylen Empire, and she could only hope that the humans were as reasonable as they claimed to be as Quen prepared for departure. Intelligence Director Shen approached with one final piece of information. Admiral, I thought you should know. We have been monitoring human communications. They are preparing for the possibility that we will reject their terms. They have contingency plans for everything. Planetary assaults, blockades, targeted strikes against our leadership. They are not bluffing about their capabilities. I know, Quen said, which is why we have to make sure this negotiation succeeds. Because if it fails, the Draylen sovereignty will not survive the year. She looked out at the stars through the chamber's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, the humans were waiting. A species that had evolved on a death world. A species that had turned their brutal evolutionary history into strategic advantage. A species that fought not for conquest but for protection. The Draylen had finally met their match. And Quen could only hope they would be wise enough to recognize it before it was too late. The neutral space station floated in the void between territories, belonging to no one and open to all. Admiral Quen had never seen so many different species in one place. Representatives from 12 worlds that the Draylen had conquered over the centuries stood in clusters, speaking quietly among themselves. And at the center of it all stood General Brooks, looking completely at ease despite being surrounded by species. His world had never officially met before. Quen approached cautiously. Her security detail followed at a respectful distance, aware that any aggressive move here would end badly for everyone. Brooks noticed her arrival and smiled. It was not a predatory smile. It was almost warm. Admiral Quen, thank you for coming. I know this cannot be easy for you. You destroyed our fleet, infiltrated our empire, and armed rebellion across our territory, Quen said flatly. No, General Brooks, this is not easy. But you came anyway. That shows wisdom. Please let me introduce you to some people. Brooks gestured to the gathered representatives. A tall, slender being with crystalline skin stepped forward. This is Ambassador Rin of the Telvar Collective. The Draylen conquered their homeworld 43 years ago. Rin's voice resonated like wind chimes. We were a peaceful species. Artists, philosophers, scientists. When your ships arrived, we tried to negotiate. You ignored our pleas and took our world by force. Many of my people died in the occupation. Quen felt shame burn in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. I was not part of that conquest. No, Rin agreed. But you benefited from it. Draylen ships used our system's resources. Draylen citizens settled on our most beautiful continent. You may not have pulled the trigger, Admiral, but you are part of the system that did. Brooks introduced others. The Novari, whose crystal mines had fueled Draylen expansion. The Yalith, whose agricultural worlds fed Draylen colonies. The Brevin, whose scientific advances had been stolen and claimed as Draylen innovations. 12 species, each with stories of conquest and occupation. Why are you showing me this? Quen asked Brooks quietly. Because you need to understand what your empire looks like from the outside. The Draylen see themselves as bringing order to the galaxy. These species see you as conquerors who took everything from them. Both perspectives are true, but only one results in lasting peace. Quen looked at the assembled representatives. Some showed anger, some showed fear, but most showed hope. Hope that finally, after decades of occupation, they might be free. What do you want from me? Quen asked. Brooks activated a holographic display showing the proposed treaty. We want you to sign this document. To officially recognize the independence of these 12 worlds and the other 26 that are currently in rebellion. To reduce your military to defensive forces only. To open your borders to independent observers who will ensure compliance. And to pay reparations to the species you conquered. Reparations? Quen said sharply. That will bankrupt our economy. No, it will force you to build an economy that does not depend on conquest and exploitation, Brooks corrected. Admiral, the Draylen have resources. You have technology. You have knowledge. You can build a sustainable civilization. You just have to stop taking from others and start building for yourselves. Before Quen could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. Brooks immediately tapped a communication device on his wrist. Report? A human voice responded urgently. General, we have multiple Draylen ships emerging from FTL, 200 vessels. They are not responding to hails and their weapons are powered. Quen felt ice form in her stomach. Tev, War Marshal Tev must have gathered loyalist forces. Brooks looked at her with those sharp eyes. Can you stop them? I have no authority over forces that do not recognize the High Command's decision to negotiate, Quen admitted. Tev believes he can succeed where Harvick failed. He is wrong, but he will not listen to reason. Brooks spoke into his communicator again. All human vessels, defensive positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. Prepare to disable the incoming fleet, not destroy it. He turned to the assembled representatives. Everyone to the evacuation ships. Move quickly but do not panic. We prepared for this possibility. As the representatives hurried toward the docking bays, Quen grabbed Brooks's arm. If Tev attacks, your response will start a war that could destroy both our civilizations. No, Admiral. Your War Marshal's attack will end the possibility of peace. But it will not start a war. Because we will end it before it begins. Through the station's viewports, Quen watched Tev's fleet approach. 200 ships in perfect attack formation. She recognized many of the vessel types. Heavy cruisers, battleships, ships pulled from defensive positions throughout the Empire. Tev had committed everything to this desperate gamble. Human ships materialized around the station like ghosts becoming solid. They had been there all along, hidden in stealth. 50 vessels against 200. But Quen had seen what 50 human ships could do to a Draylen fleet. Tev's voice broadcast across all frequencies. General Brooks of Earth, I am War Marshal Tev of the Draylen Sovereignty. I do not recognize the High Command's authority to negotiate surrender. The Draylen Empire will not end while I draw breath. Surrender the station and I will allow the civilians to evacuate. Refuse and I will destroy it. Brooks responded immediately. War Marshal, I understand your position. You feel betrayed by your leadership. You think military force can solve this situation? You are wrong. Stand down now, and your crews will not be harmed. Continue, and you will share Commander Harvick's fate. Harvick was weak. I am not. Harvick was brave and followed his orders, Brooks replied calmly. You are committing mutiny against your own government and threatening neutral civilians. That is not strength, War Marshal. That is desperation. Tev cut the transmission and ordered his fleet to fire. What happened next lasted 90 seconds. The human ships moved with the same impossible speed Quen had seen in the battle recordings. But this time they were not trying to destroy. Every shot was calculated to disable rather than kill. Engines were targeted. Weapons arrays were destroyed. Shield generators were knocked offline. Not a single Draylen ship was destroyed, but within 90 seconds, all 200 vessels were drifting helplessly in space. Tev's flagship was the last to fall. Human boarding craft attached to its hull. Within minutes, Brooks received confirmation. War Marshal Tev is in custody. His crew surrendered without resistance once they realized what was happening. Quen watched in amazement. 200 ships. 90 seconds. And not a single Draylen death. The humans had proven their point more effectively than any speech or treaty could. Brooks turned to Quen. Admiral, you now have a choice. You can return to the High Command and report that resistance is futile, that the humans can and will defend their position. Or you can stay here and help build something better than what existed before. Quen looked at the disabled fleet. At the station full of representatives from conquered worlds. At General Brooks standing calmly despite having just won another decisive victory. And she realized that the Draylen Empire had already ended. The only question was what would replace it. I will sign your treaty, Quen said quietly. But I want guarantees. Guarantees that the Draylen people will not be left to starve or suffer. That our core worlds will be protected. That we have a future beyond servitude. You have my word, Brooks said. Earth does not want servants. We want partners. But you have to be willing to become partners first. That means acknowledging what your empire did wrong, making amends where possible, and building a new society based on cooperation rather than conquest. 3 hours later, the treaty was signed. Admiral Quen representing the Draylen High Command, 12 ambassadors representing the freed species, and General Brooks as witness and guarantor the Draylen Empire, which had spanned 400 systems and lasted 10,000 years, officially ended. In its place came the Draylen Federation, reduced to 50 systems but with the possibility of genuine peace for the first time in millennia. 5 years later, Quen stood in a different station. This one was jointly administered by multiple species, including humans and Draylen. She watched young Draylen officers training alongside human instructors, learning defensive tactics and cooperative strategies. Saw Draylen scientists collaborating with Telvar artists on projects that combine beauty and function. Saw former enemies becoming friends. Lieutenant Bryn approached, now wearing the uniform of the Federation Defense Service. Admiral, the new recruits are ready for inspection. Quen smiled. They are not recruits, Lieutenant. They are students. There is a difference. She walked among the young people from a dozen different species, all learning together. Learning how to protect rather than conquer. How to defend rather than attack. How to build rather than take. Commander Harvick stood nearby, now an instructor teaching tactical history. His lectures on the Battle of Earth were required study for all military personnel. Not as a celebration of Draylen might, but as a lesson in humility and adaptation. Admiral, Harvick said as she approached, I have been asked to update my lectures to include the Battle of the Neutral Station. Tev's attempted coup and its 90-second resolution. What will you tell them? Quen asked. The truth. That the humans could have destroyed us completely. That they chose mercy instead. And that mercy proved stronger than any weapon we possessed. Quen nodded approval. Good, that is exactly the lesson they need to learn. As she left the training facility, Quen received a message from General Brooks. He was still on Earth, overseeing humanity's expansion into their local space. But he remained in regular contact with the Federation. Admiral Quen, I wanted to inform you that 3 new species have requested membership in the Federation. They have seen what we built from the ashes of the Empire and they want to be part of it. Not through conquest, through choice. Quen felt pride swell in her chest. Send them the requirements? If they meet the standards, they will be welcomed. She looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed. The Draylen had learned the hardest lesson any civilization could learn. That true strength was not in the ability to conquer, but in the wisdom to know when not to. Earth had struck the Empire, and, in doing so, had given the Draylen something they had lost millennia ago. A future worth building.